The Mavericks are officially exploring the trade market of Anthony Davis. Giannis is out with a groin strain, and Steve Kerr is calling out the league for soft tissue issues around the league and implores the NBA to look at shortening the schedule. We're going to talk about all that plus more right after this.
Welcome to the number one place for your daily basketball news and analysis, NBA Central.
What's going on, basketball fans? Welcome to another episode of NBA Central, your number one spot for everything basketball related. I'm the host there, Haize, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at NBA Central Pod on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that said, let's go ahead and jump into this content for today, y'all. And Tim McMahon of ESPN reports that the Mavericks are now exploring the trade market for Anthony Davis, saying this: the fallout of the Luka Doncic trade continues to impact the Dallas Mavericks nearly a year later. After the Mavericks fired Nico Harrison, the team will now explore the trade market for Anthony Davis. Acquiring Davis was central to Harrison having traded Doncic to the Los Angeles Lakers. Dallas expect to see what they can get in return for Davis ahead of this season's February 5th trade deadline. Davis is expected to miss at least one more week while recovering from a strained calf. Mavs governor Patrick Dumont has taken control over approving when the superstar, a big man, will be able to return to the court. Now, here's what we'll see. Right? Is that when you pair everything that we've heard over the last week or so in regard to Anthony Davis, we've heard that teams around the league, some teams at least, want to see Anthony Davis have a little bit of stretch there of health before they pull the trigger on trading for Anthony Davis, who does have an almost $60 million contract, right? We've also heard that teams are going to be wanting to discuss what the extensions could look like for Anthony Davis at the end of that, and that all makes sense, right? Like, everything makes sense for that when it comes down to trying to figure out what the future is going to look like for Anthony Davis. And that's what this team is going to have to try to decide. And any team that trades for him is going to have to decide of what does it look like to trade for? What are you willing to give up? And then are you willing to reach an extension already, which I think he's extension eligible this summer, where he can sign an extension even with him having a player option on the last year of that deal. So teams are going to be trying to explore that to see what they can get for Anthony Davis. But this all comes down to health for AD. That is the biggest thing. Most teams, I would say probably out of the teams that don't have him, the Dallas Mavericks have him, him and the Lakers, the Mavericks and the Lakers, 28 other teams in the NBA would probably be interested in looking what the trade market would look like for Anthony Davis if you knew for sure he was going to play at least 65 games every single year. But you just don't know that. You don't know what the health of Anthony Davis is going to be year after year. And that in lies the biggest problem for Anthony Davis. When he's on the court, you know who he is on the court. Do you still need a leader around him? Absolutely, right? Do you still need other things to make him make sense? Is he the type of player that you put on your team and you're instantly a finals contender? No, hell no. But Anthony Davis is damn good. Anthony Davis is a transformational player when he's playing well. And that's why it puts even a bigger thing. He's played 5 games this season. Yeah, he's averaging 20 and 10 and over 50% shooting out of those 5 games that he's played, with 27% from the three-point range. But the fact is that you just can't bet on his health. And so the Mavericks, who have their pick this year, and then they don't have full control over another pick until 2031, will be looking to recoup some of the picks that they have given up to build that team that they built around Luka that made it to the NBA Finals. They're going to be looking to recoup some of that. And Anthony Davis theoretically offers them the best chance of recouping the most of those picks. Now, you still got Daniel Gafford. You got PJ Washington, who could be traded in the offseason. You got other players that you can look to move off that Mavericks team. Kyrie Irving could be another one. And when you do that, when you make those moves, you're hoping that you're going to sit there with a stockpile of draft assets. You got Cooper Flagg as a young player here that you're going to be building around as the youngest player in the NBA, who's about to turn 19 soon. You have all of those things, but you want to start building a stockpile of draft picks, and maybe the Mavericks can do that. I think if between Anthony Davis and Kyrie Irving, if you end up moving both those pieces, if you can net 4 first-round picks back between those 2 players, that's a great haul for those. Now, will you? It really depends. Like players' value for draft picks is all over the place right now. Like, there's no standard for it. You've seen a player like Desmond Bane go for 4 first-round picks, right? Mark Williams went for 2 first-round picks. So, what does that mean for a player, like Anthony Davis, and what you can get for him and for Kyrie Irving if he's back healthy in December? And that's what the Mavericks are going to be trying to figure out in this. So, according to Tim McMahon, they're now expected to look heavily look at that. And I guess we'll see what the future does hold for them, man. The Mavericks are already close to the second tax apron, so they're probably going to want to avoid adding some big long-term money in that case as well when they move Anthony Davis. And we just got to see what the future does hold at that point. But let me know what you guys think down below. Hearing that the Mavericks are now expected to heavily explore the trade market for Anthony Davis, even though we kind of expected that already, what do you think they can get back? And how healthy does Anthony Davis have to show that he is between his return and when he's ultimately moved for teams to really be interested? Let me know that down below. All right, moving on. Giannis Antetokounmpo is expected to be out for 1 or 2 weeks with a low-grade left groin strain. And, this is, unfortunately, Giannis, who the Mavs have been really good right over this time. But Doc Rivers said that he began favoring the groin in the first quarter of Monday's game. And he's averaging 32 points, 63% shooting, 11 rebounds, 7 assists through the first 12 games of the season. And this Dallas Mavericks team has been really solid so far to start this year, right? Now, I don't necessarily have the Milwaukee Bucks thing. I said Dallas Mavericks, the Milwaukee Bucks as a championship contender or anything like that, but they sit at one game above 500 now at 8-7, right? Technically, they'd be out of the playoff scene as things stand right now, and that's one of the concerns. They've lost 2 in a row. They're 4-6 in their last 10. What are the Milwaukee Bucks going to do here? And without Giannis, that team goes from looking like a solid team in the Eastern Conference to a collection of players that are decent, but Giannis is the engine. How they fit with Giannis is the most important thing, right? And that's what we're going to have to see. And that's the question that remains there, is how the Bucks are going to be able to stay afloat. 2 weeks without Giannis in the grand scheme of things isn't a whole lot, right? But when you look at the fact of you have Giannis Antetokounmpo averaging 31 points. You have Ryan Rollins averaging 17. Other than that, it's Kuzma, Miles Turner, they're averaging 12 and 13 points. They have a number of players averaging double-digit points, but you need more than that. You need Giannis. Everything around this team was built around how these players fit around Giannis. That's what the backbone of this team was built on. And without that, this team could be in a free fall. Now, they can easily go on another winning streak once Giannis comes back. That can, put them back where they were, especially in the Eastern Conference. That's always possible. But, it's going to be very interesting to watch to see what Doc Rivers and this Milwaukee Bucks team does without Giannis Antetokounmpo being on it. And so we'll get to see. But, Giannis missing some time, I kind of think goes hand in hand with our next topic, and that is Steve Kerr. Steve Kerr and the Warriors, for the most part, that organization has been very vocal in regards to they think that the schedule should be shortened, right? And Steve Kerr raised an interesting thing. He said this, that he feels that he believes that wear and tear, the speed of the game, the mileage are factoring into these type of injuries that we're seeing around the league, basically saying that the increase in pace that we're seeing around the league is leading to that. When you look at it, Anthony Davis, Ty Jerome, Dylan Harper, John Morant, Drew Holiday, Victor Wembanyama, Stephen Castle, like Giannis, who we just talked about, Kobe White missed some time. Like, there are a number of places. John Morant, who I think I already did mention, like there are a number of these soft tissue injuries going on around the NBA, and that's a problem, right? And when you look at it, according to league data, right, the NBA is playing its fastest average collected pace since the 1888-89 season. And player tracking data shows that teams are traveling 34.3 miles per game and 4.43 miles per hour, the longest distance and fastest pace since tracking began in 2013-14. Kerr going on to say this. Across the league, everyone understands that it's easier to score if you beat the opponent down the floor, get out in transition. But when everyone is doing that, these games are much higher paced. Everyone has to cover out to 25 feet because everybody can shoot threes. We have all the data. Players are running faster, further than before. We're trying to do the best we can, but we basically have a game every other night, and it's not easy to do. And, that's a great point. And I get it that these guys are gladiators, and that's how we look at these players, and rightfully so. And, while people label things and quickly to say things like, oh, NBA players now are soft. I've always pushed back on that because I think now we just see a better recognition of medicals. For example, we didn't know 20 years ago how calf injuries directly led to strain on your Achilles. We know that now. So now you're seeing an injury like with the calf that would have maybe been a couple of days lead to being out for weeks because they now better understand how those things are linked together. So when you pair all of that together, with the increased pace and how players are moving, how fast they're moving, how much they're moving, Steve Kerr may have a great point here. He goes further on to say this. We literally haven't had a single practice on this road trip. Not one. We've gone a week or longer. 8 days, not one practice. It's just game. So not only is there no recovery time, there's no practice time. There was a different, that was different back in the day. You did have 4 games in 5 nights, which was not great, but then you'd have 4 days between games. You take a day off and have a couple of good practices. And, that's what it is. But the thing is, I don't think the NBA schedule is ever changing. I don't think they're ever cutting the number of games because there's now too much money involved in that. And that's a sad reality of it, but it is a reality nonetheless. They're not going to cut games because now you have owners, now you have sponsors on jerseys, and that's just what it is. Steve Kerr even said that. He said this, the tricky part is that all would have to agree to less revenue. 2025 in America, good luck in any industry. Imagine some big company saying, you know what, we're not as concerned about our stock price. And that's really what it comes down to. This is still a business, and therefore the business aspect of this will always be weighed in heavily to it. And it's just an interesting, dichotomy to be in. Like you've added, the play-in tournament. Of course, the in-season tournament is regular season games until you get to into the Vegas part of it, the finals. But even then, you're still adding games in. Like it's just the NBA eventually is going to have to catch up with something. And, whether they cut down travel in a way and maybe instead of so much traveling back and forth, you do series like they do in Major League Baseball or something like that, where, hey, if Dallas is coming to town, for example, you're going to play both your home games against Dallas. When you go to Dallas, you'll play both your away games that you're going to play in Dallas in the same stretch rather than traveling and coming back. Now, that's more so a travel outside the game of basketball. It really doesn't do as much for the pace and the number of games played, but it can make it to where you do get in some more of those practices, right? Because you're going to be in the same city for 3 days, for example. So therefore you can work in more practices. You don't have to do as much. Maybe that type of thing could help with that. I don't do NBA scheduling, so I don't even know what all goes into making sure all that works out, but I'm sure there has to be somewhere to meet in the middle. And that's what the NBA is going to have to do, because when you look at the number of injuries around the NBA, there's no doubt, there's no way that you can say that the injuries have not risen in some shape, form, or fashion. The question just becomes about how much of those injuries that just would have gone previously undiagnosed versus what is the actual increase in the frequency of injuries because of the number of games played and all the things that factor in, because you can't limit pace, right? You can't limit something like that, but I guess we shall see what's going to happen there. But you guys can let me know how you feel on it down below, as always, man. But that's going to wrap up today's episode of NBA Central. The Mavericks looking to flip AD. No shit. Giannis is out for a couple of weeks. That sucks. And now everybody around the NBA is going to be looking at it and saying, hey, what's going to happen with all these injuries and how that's affecting people's enjoyment of the game. So I guess we'll see there, right? Is the NBA moving too fast for its own good? Let me know what you guys think on that down below. But that's my time for today, guys. Make sure you guys are following us at NBA Central Pod. You send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns, NBA Central Show at gmail.com. And then lastly, if you want to leave a text message and or voicemail for the mailbag, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We're the #1 spot for everything basketball related. Stay locked in, stay hoop ready, and I'll catch you guys on the next one, the next time I feel like making a video. Peace.
This has been a presentation of the Breaks Media.